How do you turn your passion for food into your life's work? And how do you build community across oceans and language barriers? Well, today's guest has done both. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Molly Stevens, and I'm here with my co-host, Kristin Donnelly. Hey, Kristin.
Hey, Molly.
Well, I'm excited about today. I'm excited about every episode, every chance to talk cookbooks. But today, our guest is coming to us from her farmhouse in Tuscany, right there. It sounds pretty idyllic. But Giulia Scarpaleggia is a Tuscan-born food writer who's got her first U.S. book, but she's been writing for quite a while.
Yeah, 5 other books in Italian.
Yeah, and she's been blogging, and she's got a Substack, she's got a podcast, she does cooking classes. You know, we talk a lot about community, especially this season, and how Giulia is working to create community across the globe. Yeah, in 2 languages, because she has both Italian speaking and English speaking.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe she produces content in both languages, you know, like the newsletter and her blog, all of that.
Really interested to hear how she does it all, and from Tuscany. So her new book just came out with Artisan, or last spring came out. That's how she came to our attention. But we're going to get into how she got to this point and what she's up to next. Giulia, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you here. And we are going to talk about your new book, but you write in your bio that you studied communications, you worked in marketing, I think you did event planning or event managing before you got into cooking and writing about food. So how did you make that move?
As almost every Italian, I've always loved food. I had a grandmother cooking, so I was surrounded by food. But my choice at the beginning was to study communication and marketing. When I started my blog almost 15 years ago, I was actually working in an office. It was in marketing, communication, event organization. It was in olive oil. So I was promoting the culture of extra virgin olive oil. And that probably gave me the reason to start blogging, because I was surrounded by food. But no one was talking about food. It was like you wanted to promote olive oil without mentioning the food. And it's basically impossible. So that's how I slowly started reading blogs and then writing my own blog. And then from there, I finally decided to give it a try. I was still living with my parents. I was single, so nothing was an obstacle. I tried for 1 year. My parents were very nice. They said, try for 1 year and see if things will work. So I started doing cooking classes. I started working with local magazines, and everything happened. So after 2 years, when I left my job, I had 1 year of trial, and then now it's 13 years I'm giving cooking classes and 11 years that I'm working on my own.
That's awesome. And was that all in Tuscany?
I was exactly here in Tuscany, and actually I'm still living 7 meters far from my parents' house. I took this big move from their house to my house. I live over my grandmother, next to my parents, and I was working 20 minutes from here. When my job ended, I had to face a decision, because if I wanted to work in marketing, probably I had to move somewhere else. Because here it's basically in the countryside of Tuscany, between Siena and Florence. So no big opportunities. I really didn't want to move, and I really wanted to try and see if I could work with food and English, as I was hoping. And so that's why I stayed here. This is my place in the world.
Yeah. So 14 years. It's been 14 years since you started dabbling.
Yeah.
It's interesting something you just said, Giulia, about how you wanted to work in food and English, because you, before this new book, Cucina, Povera, you wrote 5 cookbooks in Italian. Yes. With Italian publishers.
Exactly. So 5 books, 2 of them were translated in English, but I've been blogging in Italian and in English almost since the beginning. At the beginning, I was one of the only bloggers from Italy that was blogging about Italian food in Italian and in English. And that was probably one of the reasons that I started working from my blog and giving classes, because everything that I was writing was immediately in Italian and in English. And the thing is, I love the English language almost as I like food. I owe this to my English teacher from high school, and I fell in love with English. And so the rest is history.
Yeah, that's amazing that it's quite a bit of work to create content already, and then to be doing it in 2 separate languages. I have to ask, each time, are you writing each from scratch, or do you like use some translation apps and then fix it up?
Usually I write in English, then I pass everything to my husband. He makes the first translation in Italian, and then I go through the translation in Italian to make it sound like me.
Nice.
That's the boring part, because I really love writing the first time. That's why for my fifth cookbook that was translated in English, I had a professional translator to translate from Italian to English, because I love writing, but translating is really another thing. And so for the moment, I write in English and my husband translate into Italian. Then I check everything to make it sound like it's my voice.
You say something in the introduction to your new book that you say you love writing as much as you love food. Not every food writer says that. In fact, quite a few say the opposite, that the writing is the hard part, or whatever. But that's so interesting and joyful. It's wonderful. Yeah.
One helped the other passion, because I love cooking, but I never cooked properly before having a blog. Since I start writing, I start cooking more and more. And so the two passions develop together.
You talked about, like most Italians, you grew up loving food, knowing food. So when you're going between those languages, are you assuming different levels of knowledge with your audience?
Yes. Since I write first in English, I try to be more clear as possible about the things I want to say. And sometimes in Italian, I might skip some explanations. But other times, so I talk about traditional Italian cuisine, and it's not so well known by everyone. So sometimes even Italians, they need a little bit of explanation. And it was true that everyone knew how to cook. Now it's not like this anymore. I have friends that definitely would need a cooking class. And so I think that what I'm writing is for everyone. It's not just because I'm writing about Italian food for an English-speaking community. They are mostly the same, the two articles that I write.
Let's talk a little bit about the Italian cookbook market. What is it like to write and launch a book for that market?
So different. So that's the reason why I was so happy when I had the chance to write a book with an international publisher. Usually you have 4 months and there's like editing almost doesn't exist. So my previous cookbook went through one editing and I didn't have a saying on anything. So I had written my text that went through the editing and then I had the book. So definitely less participation. And then, of course, the market is much smaller. 5,000 copies are printed every time they print a book. And they have a very short life. So sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's a couple of years. But definitely what is different is the approach of the publishers. You are supposed to do everything most of the times. There might be a photographer, but most of the times you do everything. You have a proposal, you pick your theme, and then you're on your own most of the times. So at least this was my experience with the previous 5 books. Slightly different because my second cookbook, I Love Toscana with Food Editore, 10 years ago, that's when I learned how to write a book because they took time to explain me how. But then apart from that, usually it's you're on your own. You write everything, you send it, and after sometimes a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, the book is published. That's, I think, the biggest difference. And then you really miss the team. In this case, of course, my husband, Tommaso, is the photographer. So we were already a team by ourselves, but also working with an editor. And that has been incredible. You learn so much.
It's interesting that the books are also short-lived. And when books come out in Italy, is there a lot of fanfare around it?
It really depends on your publisher. It depends on how big your profile is on social media. But usually you might have a couple, 5, 6, 10 book launches, and then that's it. I've not been lucky with my previous one because the PR office of my publisher, he resigned just before my book came out. And so the book, poof, it just fell there, silence. But, it really depends. There are publishers that invest in promotion, but most of the time it's all on you.
Yeah.
And you've worked with different publishers.
5 publishers, yes.
Yeah.
That's why we really hope to be able to do a second cookbook with the same publisher now, just because it's so much energy in learning every time how you have to work with a new publisher, and then all that work is wasted if you have to change publisher.
So we'll talk about how Judy Prey at Artisan found you, but had you reached out to any international or U.S. publishers before this book?
No, never.
Okay. So then in 2020, you write that you get an email from Judy Prey at Artisan. It says, I'm writing to you because I'm a fan of your work and I have a cookbook idea that you could be the perfect author for.
Yeah, I start crying.
So you're tearing up just hearing this now.
Yeah, I start crying, and my husband, he thought it was spam. So he had almost canceled the email, and then he saw me crying. And that really was a memorable moment. It was during lockdown. I was pregnant. We had just lost my mother-in-law. So everything was very emotional, very tense. And we were trying to find a way to write a cookbook. We were thinking about self-publishing and writing a book in English for the first time, directly for an international market. Since we didn't have classes at that time, we said it's the right moment. We do it now or we won't be able to do this. And then we received that email. I still get emotional when I think about that because it's like a dream coming true. And that was real. That was real. There was a real contact. And so we start working on the proposal, and then we start working on the book, and 3 years after the book is here.
Yeah, she comes to you with like a kernel of an idea, but you still did go through that proposal process, it sounds like.
Yes, of course, not like a proper proposal because they already had the idea. So they were already interested in the idea, but they wanted to see how we could develop the theme of cucina povera. And that's when I realized that cucina povera has been in my way of cooking, in the way I teach classes since the beginning. It's like the philosophy of your food, but then it's so into your DNA that you don't realize until someone else from the outside says, oh, what about a book on cucina povera? And then you start researching and you find all the recipes that you already made, and the principles that are guiding you are the principles that are guiding cucina povera. And so that was interesting. We start working on the ideas and the recipes, and the book slowly became real.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you say that, because if you look at your previous books and your newsletter and everything, they're all about this, market-driven, very simple, economical style of cooking. So I didn't realize that that was the idea that came from Artisan.
Yeah.
It just goes back to what we often talk about. You just, if you find what it is that is your signature or your brand, put a word on it. But if you keep doing what it is that you truly love, there's a theme to it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like in real life during cooking classes, teaching people how to shop at the market and respecting the ingredients. Every single leftover becomes something else during our classes. Or it's like a cook at home, or what my mom, that is not a great cook, but this is what she's been doing since I was born. And not to talk about my grandmother, she was a farmer. So that was in their way of cooking. But this has been the theme of my previous books and the way I teach classes, but I needed someone else from the outside to realize this.
Yeah. The term cucina povera, it's been romanticized in the United States over the years. I was wondering, like in Italy, is it a term that's frequently used to describe a style of cooking? And is there a similar romance around it?
Yes. So cucina povera are usually considered the recipes of the tradition. So everyone loves something belonging to our tradition. Even though cucina povera, people were really poor. So they were doing this not because it was trendy, but because they had to do that out of necessity. And so it was not that romantic as we think now.
Sure.
It was like that. They had to eat beans and chickpeas because they couldn't afford meat. They had to cook with corn and potatoes because in the mountains they didn't have wheat. They would use all the offal and less exclusive cuts of animals because this is what was left in the slaughterhouses. So it was out of necessity. But now, of course, this becomes a little bit romanticized as the good cuisine of the old times.
Got it. Okay.
So talk about working with Artisan. I mean, you've already alluded to it, saying that, having the team and having it is a much more involved process than your previous.
Yes. So first of all, Tommaso and I wanted to work as they work, we say, outside of Italy. So first we will test the recipes. Then, you write everything. Then eventually we will take the photos, because with my previous books, it was like, okay, let me test this recipe. Okay, this works. This is the recipe. And then I'll take the photo of the food, done. So it was like, you could test the recipes 1 time, 2 times, but if it was good, you would take a photo and that recipe was already acquired. Okay. This time I tested all the recipes. It was during lockdown. So a lot of research was done through WhatsApp calls or Zoom calls or research through books or YouTube. And I was contacting my friends. How do you make this? And how do you turn this mushy thing into a delicious thing? That was the first moment of testing. Then I had a recipe tester in the US, and that was incredible because I could have someone testing all my recipes with local ingredients. And I realized that my flour is different sometimes, or the ricotta. And then she helped me also translate everything into cups and tablespoons. Then we had all the writing, then we had the editing, and then we start taking photos. Of course, having a photographer in the house was a privilege because we could have several photo shootings through the seasons. So not just one single photo shoot, but still we try to focus on writing and then photography. Also, we were a little bit more organized. This was our dream really since the beginning, to be able to work as a team and to create something together. As we were creating a daughter, we were also creating a book together, and that was fun.
Yeah. When was your baby born?
August 28th, 2020. So right at the beginning of the cookbook working. Yeah.
Your husband, who does all the photography and videography for your various platforms, that was part of the deal, that he would do the photos for this book from the beginning.
Yes, exactly.
Because did you shoot right there in your farmhouse, or?
Yes, exactly. Everything here in this room, my cooking class studio and photo studio. Until that moment, all our photos, especially online, they were too crowded. Because if you try to promote, for example, a brand, we were working at that time with several wineries, local wineries. You try to put the bottle and then cork opener. So you try to make the photo a little bit redundant for a brand. And so what they asked was try to make your photos not bare, but a little bit more simple. And we really embraced that and we loved that. So, and what was more important for us was we want to have here real food with our real life. So everything was taken during daylight because we wanted the real Tuscan light coming through the windows. We used everything that we use for eating and serving the food during the cooking classes, and all the food at the end became our lunch or dinner. And they appreciated this natural aspect of the photos. Actually, at the beginning, they were very happy and enthusiastic about Tommaso's photos. And I was like, I hope they will like my recipes as much as they like the photos because, a little imposter syndrome started to appear. And so we were happy that we were both appreciated for the writing and for the photography. So as a team.
Well, I was curious about the recipe tester. Is that a contact you had, or did Artisan help you find the U.S. recipe tester?
They already had the recipe tester, Jessica Battilana. So they said she's going to be your recipe tester. And we worked together for months to test all the recipes. And that was very helpful also to understand what is available or common. For example, I wanted to include a recipe for lampredotto, which is the fourth stomach of the cow, which is very common in Florence. So through cucina povera, so street food and offal, everything together. But then I asked her and she said, this is dog food here. So you don't want to use one of your recipes for something that nobody will replicate. So that was also very interesting to understand what is common, what is not. We had problem with sardines. It was so difficult to find fresh sardines, not, the canned ones. Mm-hmm. So I also asked, I have a cousin, he lives in California, and I asked him, he's a professor at the university. So do you know why you cannot find sardines, like fresh sardines? And he went on all an economical and migration things that sardines were not available at the moment. So that was also helpful to understand what I could use as an ingredient, what can become just a story, and what can be turned into a recipe. And also, I love to realize that our sizes for tomato cans or canned tuna, they're different. And I realized how much you depend on the size of your tomato cans to develop a recipe. And then when you change culture, it's not just the amount grams to ounces, it's also the size of the can of tomatoes. And so if you want to use all your can, and you want to do that in your cucina povera, you have to find, an adjustment to the amount of sauce you use and everything. So it was very, very interesting to translate not just the grams and the recipes, but also the sizes of everything of the ingredients you're using. So she was a very big help.
You love everything cookbooks, right? Well, we love making it for you. And if you'd like to help keep us going, go to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There, you'll find links to our new merch, the coziest t-shirts and sweatshirts, and our bookstore where we earn commission from every book you buy. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Again, go to everythingcookbooks.com/support to find all the ways to show us some love. And thanks for listening. I love what you said about the recipe, and your decision that do you just want the recipe in there because it's part of the story you're telling, or do you really want recipes that people can replicate? And so I got a sense when you're talking the economy of it, you only have so many recipes you can put in a book. And so you don't want one in there that people can't cook or won't cook.
Exactly.
Kristin and I were talking earlier, wondering how you chose what recipes, because this is 14 years of cooking and blogging and teaching. And how do you choose which recipes go into your book?
Yeah, those recipes became essays. So there's an essay about street food in Italy as part of Cucina Povera. So Lampredotto was moved from being a recipe to being, something more about our culture. And I was, fine with that because, of course, that's the economy of the recipes you are using. And then how to select them. I try to identify the principles of Cucina Povera. So what is common throughout Italy to Cucina Povera? For example, respect your ingredients, use leftovers. And then I try to see how different regions would use the same principle and turn that into a recipe. So for example, use stale bread. That becomes canederli in Trentino. That becomes panzanella and pappa al pomodoro in Tuscany. And then you go to Puglia and then you have pancotto, like cooked bread. So the same principle is interpreted differently according to where you are, because of course you are using what you have there. It's Cucina Povera. So what is local to you, what is available, turns the principle into a recipe. And then I try to have recipes from the mountains, recipes from the coast, and recipes from the hills, because of course the available ingredients are different. And then recipes from cities and recipes from countryside, because the Cucina Povera of the cities is mainly based on meat, affordable pieces of meat, while the Cucina Povera of the countryside is more about vegetables or forage greens or courtyard animals, so like poultry and rabbit and eggs. So I try to put together the principles, the location, the geography, some of the culture, and then eventually I wanted recipes that I would cook, that I loved. I hope that these would be the recipes that people would replicate. My final aim is that if you don't have something to make that recipe, try to understand the principle of the Cucina Povera behind that recipe, and then in your kitchen, use what you have, use your ingredients, and just make your Cucina Povera, because the Cucina Povera is very local, since it tends to use what you have, what is available, what is seasonal. So it's more about the principles than eventually the single recipe.
Yeah, it's a philosophy. Will this book be published in Italian?
I hope so. I really hope so. I'm trying to contact some of the publishers that maybe I know. Sometimes the reply is, this has not been written for an Italian audience, so this is not good for us. But what I always say is that this book has not been written like trying to use different ingredients or different techniques or simplifying something. It's the food that I cook. And so this should be good also for an Italian public, because this is what I cook. This is what everyone else is cooking. So we really hope to be able to find a publisher sooner or later, because part of my readers, they don't understand English. So every time that we share about the book, they say, and when is it going to be translated in Italian? And I'm so, every time it's like, I hope soon. We'll see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of, even just percentage-wise, your audience in English versus Italian?
Yes, it's, let's say, the Italian language is 1/4 of my English language readers. This is what I can see from the newsletter.
Got it.
Do you work with an agent?
No, it was something we were thinking about, but at the moment, it's just us.
So you're reaching out to Italian publishers?
Yeah, on my own.
Saying, here's this beautiful book and what can
Hello, yes.
Yes, hello. The book came out in the spring, right? Mm-hmm. Were you able to come to the States and do any events?
Not this time, because it came out right before Easter. This is the highest moment for us for the cooking classes. And so it was a tricky moment. It was a hard decision. But eventually we decided to have a couple of online events. And we are also promoting the book with everyone coming here for the cooking classes. So we decided for this time to postpone it, and we'll see.
I mean, that is part of the promotion, right? It's like people come to you and they maybe learned about your cooking classes from the book or book promotion or vice versa.
Yeah. And then we cook recipes from the book during the cooking classes. It's again, the book turned into real life because we cook together and then we eat together what we buy at the market, what is seasonal, what is local to us. So it's cucina povera in real life.
The design of the book to me, and I haven't put everything side by side, but it feels consistent with the design on your newsletter. And I'm wondering if you feel it's consistent and how important that was.
I think it is consistent. It was not our choice, but eventually I think it reflects also our simple style and the simplicity of the food. And it's essential and focused on like food is the hero in the photos and food is the hero in the recipes and food is the hero in our newsletters and on social media. So they are consistent.
So when you saw the design, when they first sent you the first design pages.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
Yeah, okay.
And eventually we realized how that reflected our way of being, basically. We were hoping in something more like graphic or with some graphical elements, but then we realized that that is not us. So this really speak a lot about our style, our approach to food. And so eventually we really like that.
Oh, it's interesting. So like that it has a spare feeling in a way, but it's so beautiful.
Well, it must be interesting too, because there's so many, there's a lot of landscape, or not a lot, but a fair amount of environmental shots. And I mean, you live in it. Yeah. And so, Artisan is trying to create a book that's going to transport those of us who don't there. So it's a different motivation behind the design. It's interesting.
What I like about this book is not the typical representation of Italy. There are not like lemons and Vespa and, so because this is really what is important for us to tell about a real Italy. We live here. We are not, in a postcard. That's real life, of course. So we have frozen pizza sometimes and we watch Netflix, We don't have aperitivo on the terrace every night. So we really want to show a modern, contemporary Italy that is not just the postcard of Italy. And so what I like about this book is not using that imagination of Italy that we are sometimes the first to represent Italy like that. So I like that it's a contemporary take on Italy.
Yeah, it's true. So I'm going to bring up something that is a little bit perhaps touchy or, sore, but you wrote this in your newsletter about when you received that 1-star review on Amazon and how it gave you nightmares and it just killed me. So I'm wondering, you've had a long time to reflect since then, and has having that review taught you anything? Are you at peace with it?
So I remember we were talking about this. Your perspective really helped me to get through that night after the first 1-star review. And then we had another 1-star review that was probably worst. This is not like the heat in Italy. I'm Italian. That's what I eat. Oh. But then I started laughing about those 1-star review because really it's just, the idea of one person. They can have their own ideas. Of course, the first one was very heavy because it was the very first review from your very first international cookbook, and it was 1-star review.
Oh, it was the first review. Oh, no.
That was the first review, yeah. And it was the night before Easter. I had nightmare the whole night. But the thing that was really annoying was that it said that the book has not been tested because the recipe for the veal tongue was done differently from how this person was doing the veal tongue, and it was sure that my method was not working. So that was what was annoying me, because if you say that you don't like the book because it has a whole chapter on cheese, and that's one of the other reviews I received, you can say whatever you want. But if you say that the book has not been tested, that's annoying because that has been tested many times. So eventually I cooked again that recipe just to be sure that it was working, and it was working. So it's just, everyone thinks that his own recipe is the best one. That's why I put that recipe in my book, and the other person has a different idea. So now I'm more cool about these reviews. Yes, after months, I'm more cool.
It is frustrating the way at least Amazon reviews work with the stars, because then it's like this one person's opinion. Yeah. It's fine to hear the opinion, but then you get this it averages out, so you have this 1 star.
Yes.
Unless you have like tons of other great glowing reviews to average it out. It's awful. It like makes it look like a 1-star book when you're like, no, it's one person's bad opinion.
When I have to mention this, the first review on the Italian Amazon was 1-star review again, because the book was in English.
Well, I just looked at Amazon and you're almost 90% 5-star. So
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I wanted to see how you were feeling now many months later.
Much better now.
No, there are lessons in there because it's both on writing reviews and how to react when you read them. I'm thinking when you wrote about moving from your blog to your Substack, you wrote a very personal thing as well about how you felt this guilt for abandoning your blog community. And you manage community and you've built community on so many different platforms.
Yeah.
It feels very personal, the way you write about it and the way you communicate with your community. You didn't abandon your blog. No. You moved your focus away, or you added the newsletter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I started my blog, I was 28. I was young. I was single. And I poured all myself into that blog. Really, I was Jules' Kitchen. That took me some time to understand I'm Giulia and I'm writing on Jules' Kitchen. Because for years, I felt like I'm Jules' Kitchen. All my free time, lunch break, after work, weekends, holidays, they were spent working on the blog. Because I really wanted to turn that passion that was like so deep in that moment into something real, into a job. So my holidays were like, I would go to London to attend conferences on food writing, food photography, because in Italy it was not considered a job. I was still, you're spoiling your passion if you think you're turning your passion into a job. And I said, I'm going to prove those people wrong. And so I put so much into this blog. Then it was my longest relationship because I met my husband Tommaso after I started the blog. So the blog is my longest relationship. And since everyone was like, my mom was like, you're going to stop blogging as soon as you find a boyfriend because, it's taking too much time. You cannot deal with a blog and a boyfriend. So first of all, I proved it wrong because I met Tommaso through the blog. We got married and now we're working together. So Jules' Kitchen became a family project. And then it took me a couple of years to understand that Substack was not, I was not betraying my blog, but I was just shifting the focus to the newsletter. Same people will read me in the newsletter. And then I was not Jules' Kitchen. I was Giulia writing about food, first on the blog, then in the newsletter. But yeah, it was a long process. And maybe working together with Tommaso and turning Jules' Kitchen into a family project and not just, my project also helped me to do this step because now Jules' Kitchen is our project. And then I can write in the newsletter. I can write on the blog. I can write a cookbook and share something on social media and have a podcast episode. And everything is together. And Tommaso and I are behind this project together.
Mm-hmm. And the cooking classes.
And the cooking classes. Sorry, that's real life.
Yeah. The newsletter is Letters from Tuscany. Is that also both in Italian and English?
Yeah. Then we have Lettere dalla Toscana in Italian, 2 separate newsletters because Substack is very, very at the beginning in Italy. So I really need to keep them separate. And sometimes in the newsletter, they are different. So in the English newsletter, we have monthly cook-alongs and we meet and we cook together. In the Italian newsletter, we offer that possibility to join us, but usually I don't have people coming from Italy joining.
And the podcast is in English mostly or all?
And the podcast is in English, all in English. And it's cooking with an Italian accent because I have a very strong Italian accent when I speak and I have the same accent when I cook. So
that's great.
Of all this content creation you're doing and teaching, is there an aspect of it you enjoy the most?
Can I say eating?
Eating. Yeah.
Yes, eating the food. It's cooking the food and sharing it. So either sharing online or sharing with people is the moment when the food is not just yours, but you share it with someone else. And so that can be in real life during a cooking class or during a cook-along when we meet on a Sunday or when we share a recipe and someone cooked that recipe. And then they say, I cooked that for my daughter or I brought that to my sister. That's the best moment.
It's the best moment. Yeah. Do you have a sense with all these different platforms, what have been the most impactful from a book sales point of view?
I would say the newsletter more than Instagram for us because now Instagram, you're there because we had to be there. It's not something we enjoy anymore. So, of course, maybe more the newsletter. And I would say the podcast. I mean, I realize that the podcast is bringing people here for the cooking classes, even though it's on a pause. Like we were more active 2 years ago. Now we have one special episode once in a while. But the podcast is still working much better than Instagram.
Interesting. You're both like longer form content where people really get to know you. And that makes sense to me. And we just saw you were working on another book proposal potentially, right?
Another dream. This time we are proposing a theme. And again, I try to find inspiration during the cooking classes and in the newsletter, because as I was saying, I love when the food is shared with someone. And so I would love this book to really answer some needs or to meet the expectation of the people that are reading us. And I got a lot of insights from the newsletter and from talking with people during the cooking classes. Now we are really working on the proposal and we're keeping our fingers crossed.
With the proposal, is it something that you've already spoken to your editor about as a potential idea, or are you going to wait until you have the whole proposal done?
Not yet. So they are expecting a proposal from us. So they know that we will send a proposal. We know it's the right moment for this, but they don't know the idea. So it will be a surprise.
Okay, cool.
Well, we will put links to all the places that people can find you, your Substack, your blog, your podcast, your books, all of that. But is there anything else you'd like to share before we let you get back to your evening in Tuscany there?
Well, yes, we are launching 3 days experiences here in Tuscany because we've been teaching mainly in the summer and it's getting hotter and hotter. The summer is long and it's heavy. So we are trying to move our classes in the fall and in winter. Again, we're trying to reflect in our offer what people are searching for. So they always say, oh, if we had more time, we would love to do this. If we had more time. So now I would say, now we're giving you more time, 3 days instead of 1. We are in a small village. It's not like Florence, it's not Siena, it's quiet, small village with a Michelin star restaurant. So the food here is very important in my town. But we are meeting for 3 mornings, cooking together for 3 days, shopping at the market. Maybe we will do, some baking. We will have beans soaking overnight. So it will be more like cooking for every day for a family. And then they will have the free afternoon to explore the nearby towns, try new restaurants. So we are trying to see if we can really move the offer toward the fall and the winter to enjoy more the food. Because in the summer, sometimes you just want a tomato salad. You don't want to cook for 3 hours. Maybe in the fall with the wood burning stove going on and, everything warm and cozy will be even more fun to cook together and eat the food together.
Yeah, let's go, Molly.
Yes.
Come, please.
That's awesome. That sounds amazing.
Well, it's very inspirational to hear the story and how, 14 years ago you decided you wanted to write about food and look at this now. So very, very impressed and inspired by the whole story. Thank you.
I'm inspired by you, so thank you. You've been a big help.
Oh, thanks for coming on. We love talking to you.
Ciao, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. The show is also available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. Any book mentioned on the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thank you, as always, to our editor, Abby Circatella. And until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.